great. Get it over with so I can relax. Title of my talk is It Lingers in the Ozarks. The theme is back in the day. Back in the day lingered until my own days, and I would like to tell you about those. The Ozarks are the home of the hillbillies, and my grandfather said, "I'd much rather be a Mountain William than a hillbilly," but that's what they call us. It came about in the late 19th century, where most of the rest of the country was getting connected by railroads, so you could travel quickly from one place to the next. In the Ozarks, the roads weren't good, and it was too hilly to build railroads throughout most of it. So these people were isolated from the end of the Civil War till about 1920. And then when automobiles got so that they could penetrate back into the hills, they were surprised to find people who were living like they did at the end of the Civil War. Not only that, they were talking like people did at the end of the Civil War, that many of the terms of what we call the Ozark accent are actually Elizabethan English, which has been preserved back in those hills for a long time. But around 1920, automobiles started penetrating back into the hills, and people were surprised about all of this. And Hollywood slandered the Ozarks. If you see, Little Abner was nice compared to a lot of the movies that describe these people as unkempt alcoholics. There are some unkempt alcoholics, of course, but that's the way that they looked at them. In reality, the Beverly Hillbillies is a real piece of art, because they have taken most of the speech and the mannerisms of people in the Ozarks and rendered it with astounding clarity. But if you don't know what the truth is, then you miss the joke entirely. But it lets you experience back in the day, such that few people have. I asked my grandmother, "Do you remember your first automobile?" "Oh, yes, very clearly. It was 1905, and this fellow had come out from St. Louis, and he had a car, and he was giving rides. It was the 50th anniversary of the end of the Civil War, and he was giving rides to all the veterans." Now, these are Confederate veterans, you understand. I said, "Oh, okay, very, very interesting." But people, not so much today, but when I was growing up, people still experience things that one would only experience during the 19th century. I lived on a small farm, and the chickens had running water, but we did not. We were still the envy of our neighbors, because we had a pump right next to the sink in the kitchen. You didn't have to carry water in from outside. And people thought that was really something else. But the chickens had running water, and we heated with a wood stove, and we were served by an outhouse. not only were we served by an outhouse, my school was served by an outhouse, and my church was served by an outhouse. And so until you got running water, you couldn't get a flush toilet either. So what happened back in the day still lingered. When I went to school in a one-room schoolhouse, and actually we had a couple of other rooms, but we had a kitchen and we had a cloakroom, but all the children were assembled in one classroom. And you don't have the opportunity for that much anymore. The building still exists. It's been turned into a single-family home. If you drive by, if you went to school there, you could pick out where the school used to be. But it's a single-family home now. So there were 2 children in my first grade class. And I started when I was 5 instead of waiting until I was 6. And it was an interesting story I didn't find out for several years. I ran into the girl who was the other half of the first grade class. Turned out that she was 5 too when she started. But the teacher needed students, otherwise she wasn't going to have a first grade, and the school was going to be terminated sooner than she wanted, and she would be out of a job. So she recruited 2 sub-legal children to make up the first grade. I'm really glad I had that experience. We were still out in the country and rather isolated. One day an 8th grader came running into the school, an airplane, and we all got up and we were running out to the door to see the airplane fly by. Not a big deal now, but it certainly was to us back then. We went outside to play most days. And if the weather was nice, to say, "Hey, teacher, can we go barefoot?" And she was allowed us to do that. So at the end of school, I got into the teacher's van, and she dropped it off at the end of my lane, and got into the pickup truck with my wife. And she says, "Where are your shoes?" He says, "Oh, I left them at school." I don't think any of the rest of you ever left your shoes at school. But it was certainly something that could happen to us rather easily. We played outside in the snow and just about under any condition except for hard rain. And I was really glad to have the opportunity to experience the one-room schoolhouse. Thanks.